Hey there, traders, coming at you live from Ionia, Michigan, and streaming across the planet. This is Shane with Futures IO. We are pleased to have you here, and thank you for joining us for our 429th webinar event. Futures IO is a trading community that is dedicated to transparency and bringing you quality education with webinars such as this. The basic membership is free. Our YouTube channel hosts over 400 videos covering just about any trading topic you can think of. It's a great resource if you're a NinjaTrader user, and all is free to the public. Check it out and subscribe for all the latest updates. And if you like what you see, you can do us a really big favor by hitting a few like buttons while you're there and share it with your friends. On social media, you can find us on Facebook. And for daily trading insights, you can follow us on Twitter at FuturesIO. Today, we've got an interactive advanced NinjaTrader user workshop. NinjaTrader VP of Technology Brett Barrett is in the house, and we're going to be covering some key advanced features and workflows available within NinjaTrader. After the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session with Brett, so please enter your questions into the Q&A box. If we don't get to yours, it'll be posted over at the Futures.io in the webinar thread. And as always, the event is being recorded, and it's going to be posted on Futures.io and YouTube within 48 hours. And now, without further delay, please join me in welcoming Brett Barrett. Brett, how's it going, man?
Hey guys, Shane, thanks for the awesome introduction. Let me go ahead and get started here. And Shane, can you hear me okay?
Just quick mic check. I can hear you just fine, dude. You're free to go ahead and share your screen. We're really looking forward to it. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Awesome. So I got my video turned on here. This will stop the other screen sharing. Do you want to continue? Yes. I'll throw on my screen. And you guys should see my screen now.
Looking good, man.
Awesome. Cool. Well, again, thanks everybody for having us in the Futures IO webinar room. It's always a pleasure when I can come down here and talk with the traders in the forums on Futures IO. You guys are a good group of people, and I always enjoy coming to spend some time with you guys. The idea behind today's webinar is I'm just going to do just an advanced NinjaTrader user workshop. This webinar is really geared towards existing NinjaTrader users. I figured I would come in and show a little bit about some more advanced workflows in the product, some stuff that I know about that you may not know about. I've got about 5 or 6 things that I'd like to cover as we have time. And then I wanna make sure just to dedicate the last portion of the webinar towards answering any user-facing questions or setup questions, things like that. So if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, go ahead and put them in the room, and we'll try to make sure that we have some time to go through those towards the back half of the webinar. All right, so I do have to get through a quick disclaimer on my part really fast, so let me go ahead and read that off really fast, and then we can get started. So the risk of loss in trading can be substantial, regardless whether it's in securities, futures, contracts, or foreign exchange. You should therefore carefully consider whether such trading is suitable for you in light of your circumstances and financial resources. You may sustain a total loss of the funds that you deposit in your broker to establish or maintain a position in the commodity, futures, or foreign exchange markets, and you may incur losses beyond those amounts. You can learn more about these risks by inquiring with your broker directly. And then lastly, this presentation is brought to you by NinjaTrader LLC, a software development company which owns and supports NinjaTrader trading platform. NinjaTrader LLC is an affiliated company in NinjaTrader brokerage. This presentation is for information purposes only and is not a solicitation of recommendation to buy or sell any security, futures, or foreign exchange contract. Any questions that are not related to the NinjaTrader trading platform should be sent to your brokerage firm directly. Okay, so appreciate you guys letting me get through that. All right. So I spent a few minutes before the webinar, and I put together a NinjaTrader workspace, which I call an Overwatch workspace. I call it a market breadth workspace, which I will actually try to post this workspace in the forum thread after this webinar, just because I think it's a cool workspace to take a look at, and you can load it up in your local instance and get a head start on some what I call Overwatch. Now, we've done a lot of webinars at Futures IO talking about, Order Flow Plus, advanced techniques for and using the Superdome and ATM strategies and all these tools that we have available for, intraday trading, scalping, quick in and out, even some high frequency stuff. We've got tooling set up and indicators, workspaces that you can configure to do that kind of trading. But NinjaTrader, for those users utilizing it, is a tool which can be molded to the type of trading and workflows that you would like to use as a trader, whether you're a short time frame trader or a long time frame trader. And I figured I would talk a little bit about some of the tooling in NinjaTrader geared towards longer term analysis, what you can expect and what you can set up to when you're looking at longer time frames. So things like daily, monthly, weekly charts and things like that. And we actually introduced some new features in the, I believe it was the last version of NinjaTrader, but it might be one back, called our COT indicator, or Commitment of Trader report, which is an advanced study that you can throw on the charts that I want to talk a little bit about, because it kind of works in the same kind of thought process or idea of looking at the market breadth, right? Which is the scope of the market across a larger time frame, and just how it's generally doing, or what it's generally doing on a long-term horizon. And I think it's useful as a trader to keep both mindsets in mind. You could favor one side or the other based on a long term, and then look for short-term opportunities based in the scope of that long term. That's the kind of trading that I used to do back in the day. I haven't traded for the last couple of years now. But at least actively anyways, I do stuff on the side with a portfolio and stuff like that. But as terms of, let's say, active day trading and stuff like that, I think having a workspace where you can switch over into this workspace and take a look at it and then go back, whether what kind of trader, doesn't matter what kind of trader you are, is of value. So point is I think this is a value no matter what kind of trading that you end up doing. Some of this will be some basic trader education and stuff that I wanted to share. And some of it is in the setup of NinjaTrader. So I've got a couple of windows on my screen. Some of these you may be familiar with, some not. Mainly in the top left here, I've got my market watch display, where I'm just keeping a quick hot list of stuff that I'm actively looking into. I've loaded it with our preloaded futures instrument list. In the middle, I've got a chart here with the COT indicator added, which I'm going to talk a little bit about that because that's an interesting one. On the right side, I've got my market breadth chart, which is a weekly display of various market internals, which I want to talk a little bit about internals, which I find that in a lot of workspaces I look at with customers, sometimes I see internals being used and sometimes not. And I don't know if that's just because, it's just not a talked about thing very often, but I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about those market internals. On the bottom, we've got a market analyzer here, bottom middle here. This is just a quote screen, supercharged with various columns that you can add. And I've got some alerting workflows that I want to talk you through on the market analyzer. And then finally, in the bottom left here, we've got an FX correlation window, which basically allows you to pull up the change over time, and you can pick what time horizon you'd like to bookmark that change from, and can evaluate what's strong versus the other. And I'll show a little bit about how this could be used in a market breadth type workspace as well. All the data that you're seeing here is provided from Kinetic. All the data that you're going to have available to you in your platform is going to depend on what data provider you use. So NinjaTrader Continuum is going to have a lot of this internal data. Kinetic's going to have this FX data, and you need access to a lot of data to do this longer term horizon studies on futures. You usually think, with stocks, FX, there's just one instrument. So when you're looking back, you just have to look back at that one instrument. There's history that you can view on a stock instrument for the last, 10 plus years usually. And it's kind of a non complex thoroughfare, if you will. With futures though, NinjaTrader has to, when we're building these, I can't see if you can see this stuff on the top of the screen. Hopefully you can, since it's covered up with some of the Zoom information for me. But on the top of this chart in the middle here, I've selected a weekly chart. And what NinjaTrader has to do is, it's actually pretty complex to build these weekly charts, in the sense that with futures, every single instrument has an expiration. So, we have, for example, for this year, I'm looking at the ES here, 0921 contract. Well, to build up this whole weekly chart, I actually had to load up, and NinjaTrader had to build this continuous chart from the provider, loading the ES 0921 contract for today's date, going back till about mid of the year. Then I had to go to the ES 0621 contract and pull it from the start and the to and end range of that contract, stitch that into the bars. Then I had to pull the data for the ES 0321 contract, pull that from the provider, stitch that, and build the bars from that. So you can see how we've got to kind of, as when you have these longer weekly charts on futures, they actually can take a little bit of time to load. So in my case, NinjaTrader's got a caching mechanism where if I switch these charts up here now, and I went ahead and did this before the webinar today, is the first time you go through, that's when you got to incur the loading cost of loading up those bars on futures. Once you've done that, it's pretty quick to switch. So you can quickly switch between contracts on your weekly charts, and these are loading many contracts back here. I'm back, we got the 20th, back to 2017 here. I've got a weekly chart being built, which that's roughly, at 4 contracts per year. You get the idea of what has to be built. So NinjaTrader's got a caching mechanism where we cache all that locally, don't request that again from the provider, and it will load much faster as a result. So the first time you come through here, you notice if you haven't done much with weekly, I would say daily and above type charts, you do have to incur and load that data. So you will see it be a little bit slow on that first and then fast subsequently. So once you pull up these charts, I actually like doing this, and you can do a lot of technical analysis on these longer time frame charts. It's kind of eerie how you can build some trend lines, you can build some Fibonacci retracements that you can build on these longer term time frames that just end up being hit right on the mark in the future. And it's kind of eerie. You kind of have to keep multiple dimensions in your head from looking at the data from multiple views, and one of those being the long-term view. And so I like to have these cached up on my NinjaTrader instance so I can quickly get to them in a workspace where I can just look at the long-term view and go through a bunch of these pretty quickly. So I can just scroll, and I can do that with my market analyzer as well. And the mechanism that I'm using to do that is this instrument link in the top right-hand corner. So I've set this to red. Now, if you've used NinjaTrader in the past and done any instrument linking in the past on the chart, it just allows you to set up a source window where you can just quickly iterate through. So in this case, I'll just go ahead and hit the keyboard down here. And as I do that, I can just quickly switch my chart. And so when I get in the view, I get into a rhythm where once per day, I'd log in the morning and I would just cycle through my markets that I'm curious in. And I would just get a mental frame in my head on each one of those markets. So NinjaTrader allows you to quickly do that. And so that's how I've got this workspace set up on both this kind of market watch, which is just a snapshot display of the current day, and this market analyzer with some additional data points. So you can do it from multiple sources. The next thing that I've got on this chart in the middle here is the COT indicator. Again, we added this pretty recently. It stands for Commitment of Trader. It comes from the CFTC directly. What we've implemented here, and there's a little bit of setup you have to do on this guy on the first time setup, if this is your first time working with COT or hearing about it. It is a little bit of a unique indicator. It took some engineering for us to do this, more so than any other indicator, I would say, in the sense that it took a bunch of engineering effort to parse this data and download it. But on the first time adding this indicator, you'll get a warning that says you're going to need to enable by going into Tools, Options, Market Data, and turn on right down here at the bottom. It says download COT data at startup. Go ahead and give that a check mark. It'll ask you to restart. And once you restart, you now have access to right click on the chart, go to indicators, scroll down to Commitment of Trader or COT, select it here, and you can add that indicator onto your chart. Now, I've done some minor customizations here on this COT indicator, but this COT indicator is easily, it's it's deceptively complex. There's a lot of customization and a lot of different displays you can do, and it takes some education on the CFTC website to really understand what you're looking at. But there's a simple display that I think is easy to understand in a webinar format, which is this one right here, where we've got 3 COT indicators here, which come this way by default, where we've got a non-commercial, futures non-commercial net, futures commercial net, and futures non-reportable position. So, you know, to give you an idea what this COT data looks like, so what we're going to do is this COT data is data published by the CFTC, and it comes out, I believe, every Tuesday. Might be slightly wrong on that, but it's either calculated every Tuesday and then comes out on a Friday. But this is data that comes out once per week, and it's really only useful if you're going to look at a weekly time frame or above. So because it only comes out once per week, looking at it on a daily chart or something like that, you know, you're just going to have the same value for a long period of time, you know, for a number of bars. So if you look at it on a weekly chart, you'll get a unique value on each weekly bar. And so what we did here is we took the CFTC data, which is formatted. I mean, this has been this way since the, I don't know, the dawn of time. CFT has been producing this data for a long time in this kind of old legacy format. There's really not any, let's say, they do have an Excel format, but it's, you know, arguably just as bad. But what we do is we'll download all this data, and it's got all this kind of tabulated data on a huge report, and you can scroll through it on just a bunch of data points. And we actually will do that for every single week and tabulate through all these data points. And the options on the indicator is how you can select which one of these data points you want to go look at. So in this particular report, there's, you know, producers, swaps, managed money, other reportables, and then there's column for long and short and spreading with open interest. And that's broken down by instrument. So here's wheat, here's Black Sea wheat, you know, and you just keep going, corn, for example. And so we take this data, and this is what we, you know, this is why I say it actually took a decent amount of engineering effort to build this, is we'll download all this data and then parse through it in real time to result in a line graph on the chart. And so what we're seeing here is 3 commitment to trader reports plotted over time, over the week on the 6E instrument. And let me switch back to the ES instrument here, just because that's what I'm most familiar with. And so I've got these values that are parsed and shown on the display. This is actually third-party data from the CFTC. It doesn't come from Kinetic. And as I click on this, as I open this up, I'll explain a little bit about this and what this really means and what we're looking at for those of you that are new to Commitment to Trader. But I just want to quickly show that each one of these reports can be pulled up here. So we've got various reports as listed directly from the CFTC website. And then in that report, we've got the fields which we can map to and display. And we've just exposed all the fields. You know, there's multiple ways to slice and dice this data, and you can look at it in various ways, either in comparison or non-comparison. But in this case, I've got a pretty good default here, which is these 3, which is non-commercial net, commercial net, and non-reportable position net. And that's for the future side of the house. And these have some colors associated with them. So let me explain it. Let me take a step back. So that's all the configuration you can do with COT and what's exposed to you. Well, how does it help us when we want to look at market breadth and looking at a weekly chart, for example? So what the COT indicator is telling us is it's looking at the data from the CFTC. And in this case, we've got the 3 lines, where the 3 lines in this case is the blue line is the non-commercial net. So what non-commercial means is these are large traders. So the blue line is large traders, things like hedge funds, for example, people that are not in the industry, but are trading at some pretty big size. So I just refer to them as large traders. The next line here is our red line, which is the commercial traders. So the red line here is showing the people actually in the industry that are trading in that industry. And then lastly, we've got the green line here, which is what's called the CFTC. It's kind of a bad name, but it's called non-reportable net, yet they're reporting it, which is small traders, speculators, things like that. And what it is it's a net value. So it's showing us the net long and short positions of those three types of traders as classified by the CFTC. And that becomes interesting to look at from a high level perspective, because when you're putting this on a weekly chart, we can see how at certain times these things might cross. They're all plotted with correlation here. So you can kind of see, yeah, we've got the, the blue line here, which is the hedge funds, is all of a sudden way more long than they were, earlier in the month, for example. Same here with the green line, which is the small traders. Those guys are less long than they have been in the past, which is interesting. And then finally with the red as well, which is the industry trading as well. So it's just very interesting to look at, and it's set up per instrument. Again, this COT indicator, because it's using data from the CFTC website, it's only instruments available on CME, I believe. Just has to be a US-based instrument, so Eurex instruments, this is not going to work for. But it's just toggled by instrument. You can go through each one. So you can go through, for example, Treasury futures, soybeans, wheat. It actually works really well for a lot of the agricultural futures instruments. So that's definitely something that should be in your toolbox and you should take a look at, is the COT indicator and utilizing that. We released that with NinjaTrader 8 just recently, and it's worth taking a look at on a weekly chart. And there might be some questions on the COT indicator. We will swing back around towards the end of the webinar and answer any other setup questions on COT. And COT is something interesting. You can use it with NinjaScript as well. You can even set up some interesting displays and things like this. So you can look at the source data. I mean, now we're kind of getting into some advanced setup here, but I'll talk about it nonetheless, which is, for example, you might want to smooth some of this data out. So you can use NinjaTrader's data series linking concept to feed the data from one indicator into another. So let's say we wanted to apply a simple moving average onto, or a triple exponential moving average to smooth it out on, let's say, for example, let's say we wanted to remove the noise, or we wanted to, if the kind of source value would cross above or below a simple moving average value, that might be a signal worth looking into. So how you do that in NinjaTrader is right click and go to the indicators dialog on a chart. From here, I'm just going to keep it simple. Let's just say we want to do the simple moving average, but again, this should work on any indicator that takes an input. So simple moving average, SMA, I just added it to my chart. And the mechanism for doing this, I'll call it indicator on indicator, is changing the input series here. So the input series will be the ES instrument weekly, unless I change it. So if I click here, go to our input series here, and I can select indicators, and I can now input any indicator I'd like. So what I can do is come down to the COT indicator, COT. And the most important thing here is you need to select the plot. So which one do you want to cover? So in this case, do you want it to be the non-commercial, the commercial, and non-reportable, which again is those non-commercial is the hedge funds, the commercial is the industry traders, and then the non-reportables, the speculators, right? So in this case, let's just say we want to do an SMA on the hedge funds, the large traders, the big money, the non-commercial. That's COT 1. So just make sure COT 1 is selected here on the plot and click OK. And then what I'm going to do is put this on the panel here. I'm going to put this on panel 1. Now panel 1 is just this panel down below here. And I don't have to do that. I can skip that step. Oftentimes I do skip that step. Let me show you how to how I quickly fix that as well. So let's say if I just don't do that step, here's what's going to happen. I click OK. And all of a sudden, all my bars went away, but they didn't really go away. They're just really small because the price axis here on this SMA is much different than the price axis on the bars. And that's because it's on the primary panel. You know, usually with a simple moving average, you want it on the primary panel. But in this case, we've done indicator on indicator, and we want it on this panel down below. So I just click it so it's selected, and I just click and drag it down here, let it go. And now I've moved that moving average right down below here. And even in this case here, we should be able just to click it and drag over here to this right panel here to get it over into the same price axis, because you can put it on a price panel on the right side or on the left side. You know, if we keep it on the left side, that's fine, but then I just kind of waste some space on that left-hand side. So I just dragged it to the right-hand side, let go, put it on that price panel, and now we've got an SMA. And I could get rid of these, and that's an SMA of this green line here, or I'm sorry, the blue line. So we can, you know, hide those other ones if we wanted to get those out of the way and just use that as a trading signal, for example. So that's one way to do it. So again, just, you know, customizing the setup, experimenting with the tools, throwing indicator on indicator, learning more about this kind of large term COT indicator and how this freely available data from the CFTC can be useful. I think it's something good to know and something to play around with. Okay, so that's the COT indicator and weekly analysis. All right, the other thing that I like to take a look at when I'm thinking about overwatch or market breadth or looking at the big picture is I've got this chart on the right-hand side here where I've got 4 data series on this chart, and they each one are indexes, okay? And I've configured these in a couple of different ways, but I think the point of this is really just to talk a little bit about indexes and how you can pull them up. If you're a NinjaTrader brokerage customer, you do have access to various index data. Same on Kinetic, you've got the same access there, and along with various other providers. But if you're on another provider, you may need to look and see what indexes they support, and more importantly, how they calculate those indexes, since some of these indexes are server calculated at the provider side, and some of them are exchange indexes. It can catch you off guard, and you need to make sure which one you're dealing with. For example, with Kinetic, some of the indexes are actually calculated on the Kinetic's server. And the indexes work by, at least the majority of indexes, not all of them, work by aggregating a bunch of general market data all into one index. So an example of this on the top here is our up volume and down volume. So I've got DVol and UVol. And an index in NinjaTrader, before I get too far here, if I double click on this chart here, you can see here's my data series. And if I just select here in the drop down, we do have some pre-configured indexes in an instrument list on most NinjaTrader instances. And you can see here everything with this little caret sign here and then an index name. There's a lot more indexes available if you search for them using the index search. You can find them that way. So for example, if I just type in VOL, and then I just click the index here, and I've got a bunch of various indexes here, which you can find it through the instrument search that way. But you can see here DVol, NYSE down volume. So DVol is the down volume, volume is the volume index, and then UVol here is the NYSE up volume. And you can do that for NASDAQ as well. And I believe there's another one that you can usually do as well, but NYSE and NASDAQ are the most common ones. And so what this index is that the server is taking all the up volume of all instruments on the NYSE, or the up value of all instruments on the NASDAQ, and computing that all in together into one big large number, and then sending that to you through the data feed. You know, obviously it's not very economical to subscribe to, 5,000 plus, I think it's definitely more than that, futures instruments on the NYSE, and way more than that on the NASDAQ, and try to compute and add every single trade together and its volume, and whether that volume occurred on an uptick or a downtick, and trying to compute all that. That's just, it's just not economical. So it's just done on the server side. They've got access to that fire hose of data, And they then compute that all together, throw it into one stat, and push it down the wire, and and voila, you've got access to it as an index. So what I've done here is I've stacked the up volume and the down volume, and you can use just volume if you just cared about total volume. But in this case, I'm highlighting when there's a imbalance between a volume across the entire NYSE that is triggered on a downtick versus an uptick. And maybe that might be some sort of signal for you. It might be good to know when up volume is significantly greater than down volume, or down volume is significantly greater in the aggregate than up volume. So this has definitely been a helpful thing for me to look at throughout the years, is to put on a graph and just keep in mind to keep your eye on the ball in terms of, the general, looking at the trees versus looking at the forest mentality. And this is one way to do that in NinjaTrader. And there's definitely a lot of other ways to do that. I've highlighted 3 others on this chart. The next one down the list here is this index called PCR, which is a put-call ratio. Same concept here, whereby this is taking a look at the number of options being traded on the NYSE NASDAQ, and then computing how many of those are puts versus how many of those are calls being purchased, and then what's the ratio of that. So a value of, a value of 1 or greater being more puts than calls, and a value of 1 or lower is more calls than puts. Obviously trying to imply some bullish or bearish sentiment as evidenced by the options activity being done. So put call ratio, I've been using this since 2008. Just a great way to just get an idea of what's going on with the market. And yeah, so I always keep that up in my kind of larger term analysis. And there's various ways to look at it too. You can see here I've got it as candlesticks because throughout the week it does tend to move. So the fun thing here that I'm seeing on this chart is just there's definitely a rhythm to it, right? So it's just another data point of which you can throw on your chart and take a look at. So definitely find that to be interesting. Next one is the VIX, which hopefully everybody's heard about, but if you hadn't, this one, you can actually do it in 2 ways on the VIX. This is the VIX index, which I think is the lesser known version. The VIX index is a calculated value as per the theme with most index. It's not although there are some exchange traded indexes. Now maybe I misspeak on VIX and put call ratio. This is where it gets kind of interesting because some of the indexes are universally used and might be listed on the exchange and calculated by the exchange and then pushed down through the exchange, and some indexes aren't. So you definitely have to get educated on that. But in terms of the VIX index here, I said there's 2 ways of looking at it. One is looking at the index, which is a calculation, which is taken just from the factual data from the exchange, and then which is what I'm looking at here. But you also can, if you have CBOT data, there is the VIX or VX futures instrument that is also tradable. I know there's arbitrage being done there between the two and trading strategies there, but you can look at the futures instrument as well and compare that to the VIX for some arbitrage type stuff. So there's definitely some interesting ways to slice and dice on the VIX. And I guess I went a long way kind of explaining kind of the technical in-depths on indexes, but I think it's good information to share and think about. But getting back to VIX, VIX is just a volatility index. So the higher this number is, the more anxious people are. Sometimes a signal of, or not sometimes, but is a signal of volatility. So I like to keep that and just kind of look at the trends, maybe draw some trend lines or something like this on VIX, look for breaks, things like that, across a longer time frame. And this is looking back about a year on this chart. Okay, so that's the VIX. So interesting information there. Definitely a tool everybody should have in their tool bag. Trend. Trend is basically that is basically advancing and declining stocks on the market. So it is a little, it does move around a lot. You know, the two that are usually used in combo are tick and trend. Tick being, you know, if it's ticking up or down. Trend being if the volume is advancing or declining on the day. So it's a little bit more stable. That's why I use the trend here when I'm looking at the forest and not the trees. Tick can be useful when you're looking at the trees. But in this case, I've got trend here. And again, you can actually pull up multiple trends. And again, they're calculated either server side or by the exchange. And you can have the NASDAQ from Kinetic. You can have the Dow Jones. You can have various versions that hold a different subset of instruments in that collection for computing the tick and the trend. So again, the trend is just a ratio of the number of volume increasing stock versus volume decreasing. So that's trend for you. So yeah, just something that I've been using for a while and wanted to share. So I guess we'll just keep on running along here. Again, just sharing some tips and tricks on some long-term analysis and some things that you can do inside of Ninja. I'll share, looks like we're coming up here on about, maybe about, probably want to go another, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then I'll take a break talking about the stuff that I wanted to talk about, and then let's talk about stuff you guys want to talk about. So the last two things I've got on my list are, I wanted to talk about the FX correlation in the bottom left and just kind of an interesting use case. What I've done here is I've customized this FX correlation window, and you can right click on it and add instruments. And I went through the search, and I went through and added everything with USD on it, just because I'm trading with US instruments only right now. If I was doing other stuff, then I can add other stuff, of course, or if I lived in another region and I was more passionate about that region, I can definitely customize it that way. But what I've done here is I've added every single FX pair, and then you need to have data from Kinetic to use this window. And it doesn't need to be from Kinetic, I misspoke. It needs to be a data provider that will provide FX data. And the nice thing about this is what I'll do is when you add these instruments on here, they're kind of added by alphabetical order. But what I've done is I've dragged them around to be in a specific format. And again, this is a correlation window. Just to summarize, in case you haven't used it before, if it's one, the two pairs are directly correlated. If it's less than one, they're not very correlated. If it's closer to one, then it is more correlated. And one is exactly correlated, which is the kind of missing box down the middle because it's just matching pair. You really only need half this grid. You know, you kind of need a triangle slice here. The other triangle is kind of repetitive, but the window looks weird without it. So we've put both halves on there. But you know, so what's interesting here is you can cycle through different time ranges. So how correlated it is in the last hour, the last day, the last week, the last month, and last year. And I've got it on the max look back here. So this is loading a year back of minute data on each one of these in historical data, and then comparing them all based on how correlated or not they are. And what I've done is, you know, when this first chart first loaded, like this might have been over here, this might have been over here, you know, this was here, you know, it just kind of looks a little bit messy, right? So what I've done, and it kind of serves an analytical function and a kind of something that you can keep an eye on, is, and I like that this actually worked out because you got XAG USD here and XAU, which is gold and silver. Silver and benchmark with how correlated it is based on the pairs, and gold, how correlated it is. And so what I've done is just drag these around until I ended up with it looking exactly, you know, put the weakest over kind of the kind of flattest in the middle, kind of drag this around. Maybe this goes over here. Maybe goes over here. Let's even keep going. You know, somewhere around there. You know, you can kind of keep playing with it, probably about there. And so I've done this to where I'm going to notice changes over time. So I've got these kind of hot spots, and you know, there might be a time where something over here turns blue on me or something like that. You know, then I kind of have a mental map on what's strong and what's not strong, and I can see those changes over time. And, you know, that might be something to keep in mind on, because, you know, obviously we're not trading in a vacuum, looking at, you know, whether there's changes in correlation between silver and gold and various currencies out there. You know, it's definitely something that's helpful to keep an eye on. So that's what the FX correlation can help you do, and just sorting those columns to get a good mental picture where it, you know, looks correct, you know, and then you can notice the change over time is something that's very helpful to do, is just to get that all sorted out. All right, and then the last thing I want to talk about is, and again goes with the theme of, you know, broad scope. You know, a lot of people may not know that you can do broad scope alerts in the Market Analyzer. So I wanted to showcase this in my Market Analyzer here. So one thing that I'll do is I'll keep a workspace running in the background with a Market Analyzer that I'll throw in, for example, and it'll become clear once I put this example together, but I can right click on this guy and go to alerts on the Market Analyzer grid. From here, I've already set one up, and I'll just remove it here, and I'll add a fresh just so I can walk you through it. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set up an alert that is going to apply to all instruments in my Market Analyzer. And what I'm going to set this alert up to is I can say, take a look at my last price column. So what's the last price? I'm using this condition builder here. And I could say, if that last price is greater or equal to, and then I could say the high of the last 52 weeks, which is a column that I've added on this Market Analyzer. And, you know, you can customize this with any columns you like, but in this case, I'm just going to say the high of 52 weeks. Now, this will get me an alert if on any instrument in my Market Analyzer that is greater than or equal to their last high of the last 52 weeks. So in this case, and that might be kind of, maybe I want to know before that happens, right? So I can apply an offset on here, and what I'll do is just, you could do percent, you could do like if I want 2% off of its high, or ticks, but in my case, I just do ticks because I'm working with futures and it's just what I'm used to. But what I'll do is, since this is a high, I want to subtract ticks. So let's say, you know, 20 ticks below the high of the 52 weeks. If that last price gets greater than that, meaning we're getting close, you know, maybe I want a little bit more of a boundary there, but whatever. I could click OK, and then I could say this name of this alert is approaching 52-week high. And I could set it up to do an alert. I can have it do various actions here, such as play a sound, share a message. You know, maybe you want it to, you can set up some share services on here so that you can make it tweet yourself. You know, I've done that before where you can set it up to tweet on and get alerts that way, for example, or or set up an email service, send an email to you. As long as this is running and this workspace is open, this alert will be processing on every single instrument in this Market Analyzer. And I would set this up for both sides. So if you wanted an alert on approaching the 52-week high, and then you want to do the inverse of that for the low, it's the same story. Come in here, click add, do the same alert. We're just inversing the condition. So last price less than or equal the low 52 weeks, for example. And then, you know, I want to add another tick offset to that. So it's when it's getting close. And I want to do a positive 20 ticks this way. Click OK. I've got my condition here. So approaching 52-week low. And you can really be as creative as you want with these alerts and as specific as you want. But I think it's just important to just kind of reopen your mind up, open on the kind of possibilities of setting up those alerts, because It is a complex alert builder. There's a lot you can do with it, but you can also do some simple alert use cases here as well. And in this case, this market analyzer is running. It's going to generate alerts for me, which are visible in the alert log, or triggers any actions that I set up. And I just want to make sure this workspace stays open. And then, we can have an alert tracking some broad, you might have some indicator, set up a COT indicator up in here when it increases or passes some value, or when commercial non-reportable, which is the retail traders, goes greater than the smart money, the hedge funds, the non-commercial side, on the COT indicator, as we talked about, and you get a crossover, you can set that up here in the market analyzer. So there's really a lot you can do with it. It does, and really there is no limit. So it's something that's forgotten about in the market analyzer. I know alerts are definitely used a lot on a single chart. For example, you want to set up a drawing alert, or crosses the specific line, crosses this indicator, but it's important to know that you can also do those in the market analyzer, and you can do it across the entire market breadth and add in as many instruments as you'd like here, and have those running in the background and set up some broad market alerts. So we are running out of time. I had maybe a couple other things to talk about, but I do want to stop here at the 45-minute mark here, and spend the next 15 minutes just going through any questions and things like that. So Shane, if you would want to take a look and see if we got any good questions there, and we can just see what progress we can make.
Yeah, cool, man. Good presentation. The COT stuff looks really interesting, and I'm an internals guy myself, so I was really glad to see you covering a lot of that for sure. Good stuff. A lot of people could benefit from. Hey, so we've got a comment here and a question. The comment was, some platforms allow one to plot the spread between two different instruments as the difference or ratio of the respective instruments. And the question is it possible for NinjaTrader to plot spread bars?
Spread bars. I'm not even sure exactly what a spread bar is, so that probably answers the question.
All right, cool.
But I guess the point is, if you're wanting to, I guess if you want to ask it in another way on what you're trying to look at without using the word spread bar, I may be able to answer.
Let's see here. Doji53 was asking, how do you create the chart without the different indicators showing on top of the chart blocking the view?
How do I create the chart with different indicators? And what was the first half of that question?
Without the different indicators showing on the top of the chart blocking the view. I think when you actually put the COT report onto the chart, it scrunched everything up to where you couldn't actually see the bars. Then you moved it down to the lower panel.
Got it. Yeah, I just selected that indicator, and I left clicked and held, and I drug it down below and let go, and that'll put it into a new panel.
Doesn't get much easier than that. Let's see. How about the FX window? Short Creeker would like to know if the FX window has the ability to track correlations of other products like Bitcoin USD correlation.
Right now, it's limited to Forex right now. One thing we will look into is the potential of Bitcoin. Really the limiting factor there is for the maths to work out. The tick size and has to be correlatable with the futures industry. There's a bunch of different tick sizes and different formats. We might have Treasury over here, which is on a way different scale. It's on trading in 30 seconds. Then, something that's trading, in a range of 2,000. It's all achievable, but you have to have custom math to do that conversion. Whereas with the FX world and potentially Bitcoin, you can do that correlation just on a standard price scale. So, it's something we would like to add. If we can get through that maths problem of, let's say, for the futures industry, we would like to add it, but as of right now, we have a blocker there.
On the to-do list. All right, cool, man. Well, I think that's it for the question. Oh, wait, actually, hang on a second. We've got another one here. Short Creeker also mentions that he wants to plot the price of ES divided by the price of ZB, and then be able to apply the different moving averages to that ratio plot.
Okay, and I think that maybe is a reclarification of the spread bars question. So what that is that's we've looked into it. It's called a dynamic data series. So it's one where you're kind of creating one on the fly based on some math. I've seen it in use, but I have not implemented it yet in NinjaTrader. There's a couple of blockers there in terms of performance and also in terms of caching. A lot of our bars, since that's kind of a custom bar type, a lot of ours is stored and not expected to change, and there's a bunch of memory. There's a bunch of reasons and stuff that we went through that why we haven't implemented it yet. There is a way to do it with NinjaScript, and specifically by pulling the data in and doing a indicator calculation to throw it on the chart, and then I believe it's freely available on our NinjaTrader ecosystem website. I believe if you look for spread indicator, you should be able to find it there. And then that's how I would suggest you do that, is to use that spread indicator on the NinjaTrader ecosystem website. And if you have any trouble finding it, our support team should be able to locate it for you. I see a question here. I don't know if it's been asked from Quant. It says COT data. Why are there only net data available and not the data detail short and long part of the data? So yeah, those are available. So let me show you where that's at. Double click on the COT indicator here. You're going to open up the COT display. And then if you go to, I think you want for that one, either the combined or disaggregated. Let me click here. Click here. Let me see what we have here. There we go. So if I go to the disaggregated futures report, which again, I don't know why they use these terms in the CFTC website. It's confusing to me too, and I got to look it up every time. But those are what they use. And to do that, now that it's disaggregated in those various forms, now you have the ability to go through the long and short versions and the spreading and the net of each one. So those are all on display for the COT, and you can factor those in whatever way, and they are available and parsable. So Shane, looks like we got you back. I just answered a Quant IT question at the end.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I'm back. Well, that looks like it about covers it. Well, you know what? Actually, when I get disconnected, every now and then it does happen, and I apologize, but I do lose some of the Q&A. So if there's anything left, Brett, go ahead and take over.
Okay, let me see here. Says, I'm going to do the ES divided by price of Z. Okay, we did that one already. Apologies, this covered earlier. I was getting late in the webinar. Is there any way to extract volume profile information, such as the value area high, point of control, etc., programmatically through NinjaScript? Thank you. So on that part there, we do have some access, but it's not. Take a look. So we're going to go into the old. Okay. We're going to go NinjaScript. We're going to go language reference. And here. And I'm looking for if we have it documented on that portion or not. Can't recall off the top of my head. So this is for if you have Order Flow Plus, there's a tool in there for volume profile, which is our volume profile indicator set, which has various values that come from that indicator that would like to be accessible via NinjaScript. And on that one, I'm going to have to get back to you. I just can't recall off the top of my head. I know with volumetric bars, we have some of that data available. With volume profile, I can't remember if it's available. So what I'll do is on that one, just hit me up on platform support at ninjatrader.com. Just say, put attention Brett in the subject there, and I'll find that out for you and get that answer to you. I just can't recall off the top of my head on that one. So again, okay. And NinjaScript's been one that's a little tricky on that one, because with the volume profile tools, you know, with a lot of that stuff, NinjaScript serves two functions. One function is just for those of you that use NinjaTrader as a development environment. You are doing your own stuff. You know, you've done coding before, or you're using the strategy builder, and there's a lot you can do with NinjaTrader as a development environment there. The second use case of NinjaScript is that it's available for ecosystem vendors to create indicators, strategies, apps, and add-ons, which are either sold or provided for free with the NinjaTrader ecosystem. And that's one of the strengths of NinjaTrader is that we've got such a strong ecosystem. And I believe we don't have access there because it implies that to release an indicator that would be dependent upon those values, the customer would have to have a lifetime license and be opted into the volumetric bars, which is usually having that dependency is not the best when you want to redistribute an indicator or a strategy, which is based on that. So in that case, what I can do is if you and I don't know which bucket or use case you fall in on NinjaScript, if it is the latter bucket, in those cases, we do provide information on how to self-calculate some of those values. And we'll tell you exactly how we do it. That way you can bring it in this really specific self-calculation part that you're looking for, and then integrate it that way. That's how I recommend going about it. So a long answer there, but I wanted to make sure I covered it from both angles. And then looks like another question just came in from Joe. Says, how can you add a moving average to an indicator like CCI? Okay, yeah, I can show that too. So first, let's go ahead and pull in a CCI. So let me get rid of this blank chart. Right click, go indicators. I'm going to add the CCI indicator to the chart. I'm double clicking. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. So I've got it added. Here's my CCI indicator. Now I'm just going to double click on it again to go back to my indicators. Now let me open up the question again. It said add a moving average, right? Okay, so moving average. So let's do simple moving average next. So I'm going to go simple moving average. Here I've got my second indicator here. And if I just click OK, it just added it up here and it was on the price bars, which that's not what you wanted. You wanted it to be on the CCI down here at the bottom. So I'm going to double click on that to edit it. This goes again to our input series. We're changing the input that this indicator is running on. I'm going to click that. I'm going to expand indicators. I'm going to go down to CCI. Here I can parameterize it. Now again, it can be anything you want. It doesn't have to be, I did not necessarily have to add this on my chart. That's optional. If you want to have a chain of complex stuff that's not even on the chart, you're able to do that, no problem as well. But just make sure that if you're gonna do that, make sure the parameters are the same here. Click OK. You can see here it's kind of in the title, an SMA on a CCI. And then last thing, if I do that here, again, it's the same problem that I showed before, where it's gonna just put it up here on the price panel, where you wanted it down here. And in fact, let me, at least I would assume you wanted it down there, but let me expand this and change this to another color just so it is obvious. So I usually don't, although I can do it in the properties dialog, it's easy enough for me just to throw it on here like this, knowing it's going to look like this. I select it, I click it, I drag it down, I let go. And now I've got a CCI, a simple moving average, running on a CCI indicator. It's called indicator on indicator. You can do that with basically anything that's got a static series. And yeah, you can have some fun with it. There's definitely some unique combinations. Okay, I think that was all the questions. So actually, not too many questions. So if you guys have any questions that you think about, I will try to sync with Shane on getting this workspace posted to the forums here in the next day or two, just so you guys can load it up and take a look and use it as a jumping off point. So yep, Shane, I don't know if you have any other final thoughts, but I wanted to thank everybody for joining the webinar. Hope we had some fun talking shop and talking NinjaTrader, and looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. You guys, we can definitely continue the conversation over at Futures.io and the NinjaTrader webinar thread. Brett, thank you again for being with us here today and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Until next time, guys. Good trading.
Attendees, thank you for joining us as well. It's been a good time, and that about wraps it up. The video has been recorded, and it's going to be posted over at the Futures.io and on YouTube within 48 hours. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit those like buttons while you're there. You do me a big favor. And then please follow us on Twitter at FuturesIO. Again, I thank you for joining us, and trade well.